Now, what's cool about the math that it utilizes, and this is what a lot of people don't know, that the basis of AI for most of it is in what they call Bayesian. And Bayesian has been around, oddly enough, since the 1700s. I mean, and the reason that Bayesian is working so well is because it thinks and it reacts the way that human beings think. And what I mean by that is, just like I said, that most marketers would look at how things did last month and they would make their best guess. Bayesian is essentially making its best guess based upon all the information that it has. The only difference is that it can do all of the math, and it can do what 100 humans would take them to do in a week. It can do it in 2 or 3 minutes or less, depending upon how many instances you have up and running of these computers.
Martians landed?
Yes.
Wearing Prada suits?
Yes.
Drinking Henry's seltzer?
Yes.
Chewing juicy fruit?
Yes, and?
Your branding here?
Yes, brand.
Your message here?
Yes, and?
A verse about?
Yes.
Your product here?
Yes.
I'm Hersh Rephun.
Yes, and?
I'm a message therapist.
Yes.
And I have a podcast.
Yes, brand.
That's right, that's it.
Yes.
We'll help you fix the world.
Yes.
Or your bottom line.
All right.
Your bottom line.
Get it. I get it. Welcome to the Yes Brand Podcast.
So,
Exactly.
all right, I'm going to jump in and introduce my guest today. Taking a spin with us down the brand voice runway is Jeff Greenfield. Jeff is a measurement and marketing leader, because if you can't measure your marketing, what is your marketing worth really in the end? How do you know it's working if you can't gauge it? And we have a lot to talk about on that level, because that mirrors somewhat my experience in advertising and social media and messaging and all of that. But let's start with Jeff. First of all, welcome to Brand Voice Runway.
Thanks, Hersh. It's a pleasure to be here. Excited to be talking with you today.
Thank you. Likewise. And why don't you kick us off with 1 or 2 examples of measurement in the marketplace and how the intel and how the strategies changed the game for some pretty big companies.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to understand how brands are able to speak to their customers, and a lot of brands are sometimes isolated with that. So before I got started on the measurement side of things, I was on the marketing side. One of the brands that I work with was a publicly traded pharmaceutical company, and they were in the aesthetic space. So they focused in on injections, kind of it was a sister product to Botox, if you will. And they had a competitor that was coming on market within 3 to 6 months. And all of a sudden, they were facing this competitive headwinds that they had never faced before. And they're in an interesting space because they're a B2C, but they're not really a B2C. They don't sell to consumers. They sell the products to doctors who then sell to consumers. So the consumers, the patients, didn't really have there wasn't much brand recognition. It was more what the doctor recommended. And if the doctor could get pretty much the same product for less of a price, that would improve their margins. And if the doctor recommended it, the patient would go along with it. And so we had a young, daring CEO at the time who was interested in trying something different, because when you're stuck with that, short range there of only 3 to 6 months, you have to do something daring. And so I created for him a faux reality TV show that was focused on their target demographic, which were women. This is back in the early 2000s, and we did a reality TV show called. Now this is before all of the different types of reality TV shows, but this one was called Hottest Mom in America, and we went to these different strategic towns for them and put on a reality TV show, a competition, if you will, that was focused on the idea that being a hot mom wasn't necessarily about looks, but was more about, how did you have your life put together? And the end result was we built a significant amount of buzz and attention, significant amount of PR. They were back in the Wall Street Journal 3 times during the competition. We then did another 6-month competition online. And the end result was they were able to head off their competitor, added about $500 million in market cap to the stock, and sales went through the roof as a result of this. So this was a way for a brand to be able to deal with what happens in a scenario where you have a nightmare scenario. Now, the nice thing about this is that it was a short term. And when I say short term, it lasted less than a year. And the results were very easy to measure. They were able to measure in terms of sales and an uptick in terms of stock value. But there wasn't anything else that changed in terms of their marketing mix. And most of their marketing at that time had primarily been salespeople going into physicians' offices. The other brand is a brand.
Can I stop you for a second, Jeff? Because that's great to unpack a little bit,
right,
in the sense that essentially this was branded entertainment.
That's exactly right.
Branded entertainment, as you well know, I'm sure, it has been a tough nut to crack. It's kind of the foundation of television advertising and radio advertising to begin with, but people forget. And then the idea of how to integrate a brand presence and message into a piece of entertainment, has been tricky for brands and marketers alike. So how did you navigate the messaging and the integration versus, with the content?
Well, it was more a matter of looking at who their target demo was, and looking at strategically what would have the largest impact for them in terms of sales. In terms of the messaging, once we understood who their customers were on both sides, the physicians and the patients, it was a matter of looking at what was going on in trends right then. And in early mid-2000s, 2005, 2006, reality television was really, really taking off. And we essentially borrowed from the American Idol playbook, which was you start in a city, and I believe we started in Dallas. And then from Dallas, we were able to get the Dallas Morning News to cover us. And then from that, we went from Dallas, I think we went to Miami. And then when we were in Miami, we used the PR that occurred in Dallas to get more of a buzz in Miami. I think by the time we got to a third city, which was in New York City, we had people lining up at 1 o'clock in the morning the night before. We had helicopters out. We had coverage on everything from Entertainment Tonight to The Insider. Every radio program in the country was covering us. So we built upon it. And that's exactly what American Idol did. What American Idol did, if you noticed, if you were pretty much every city in the US had someone audition. And when someone would make it to the next level, what their PR teams would do is they would alert the local papers where that person was from. They would alert the regional papers, the state papers. They would get AP to cover it so that everyone in the US felt like they either knew someone or they were related to someone who was related to someone. They were connected somehow to the show as a result of this. So we borrowed from that same playbook.
Fantastic. And what's the, okay, now you can move on to you're free to move on now to the next example.
The next example is a brand, Verizon Wireless, that had never done well in the African-American community. Very large brand. They had hired every multicultural agency in the US. And it seemed like the more money they spent on multicultural campaigns, their market share would actually drop. And the reason for that is that in the African-American community, Verizon Wireless was not seen as an authentic brand. It was not connected to their community. And so I came in and I still borrowed. This is right in 2006. I'm like, okay, we got to do something like an American Idol, but it has to be something authentic. And so what we did is we created a program called How Sweet the Sound. And How Sweet the Sound was an American Idol style contest for church choirs. And we started at the church level, and it led up to a national contest. We ran a test in Memphis, did incredibly well, ended up winning an Effie Award, which is an award for effectiveness of marketing campaigns. And then that rolled out to a nationwide contest and actually had turned into a TV show on the Gospel Channel. And it's still around today, which is pretty amazing.
Well, that shows you, Jeff, that, this is what I've always have preached, no pun intended, no gospel choir pun intended, but I have always preached that you ought to sell the truth in the sense that you're tapping into something that's totally real, that's totally grounded in who your audience is. You're not trying to convince the audience of something. You're trying to present to them what they want to participate in and see, and therein they see the value of the brand. Or in this case, they see the sincerity of the brand by sincerely investing in this community and in this concept. And that's why and you would think that branded entertainment nut wouldn't be so hard to crack. And yet we've seen so many missteps, and we've seen so much tone deafness, in even brands as big as, Coke and others who've gotten themselves in various messes, sometimes not even particularly controversial, but just a misstep, a misread, So now tell me a little bit about where you're at now, because you've built your own brand. Now you have built a really nice, successful brand on this knowledge that you've accumulated, on these accomplishments. So tell me where you're at right now.
Yeah. So after those huge programs, or it's right around the time that digital really started to explode, because prior to 2005, brands were just dabbling in the digital ecosystem. And then all of a sudden by 2006, more and more money started to go in. And the problem with digital for brands is that now there was this new place to spend money, but it's so fractured. It's not like there's one channel in digital. There's millions of channels, and there's all these different formats. There's YouTube, there's Google, there's Facebook. And so what ends up occurring is being able to delineate out what's working in terms of messaging, what's working in terms of where I'm spending, who's driving more people into my sales funnel, what's resulting in more sales, became more and more complicated. And also what also occurred is that with more and more players, the amount of fraud that was coming into this new ecosystem was just off the hook. And so I developed a platform back in 2008 for large brands to measure the effectiveness of their media, because this was a whole new game in 2008, because now there was so much digital on top of TV and radio and everything else. Built that out, scaled it up to some of the largest advertisers in the world. And I exited there in 2019. So spent about 12 years in the space. And I said, I've done everything there is to do. Everything seemed to be in a great shape. And I left, and then the pandemic came. But I was certain that I was done with measurement. And then all of a sudden, about 2 years ago, we're now in this new world where the digital ecosystem is making these drastic changes. So the entire ecosystem has been built on the ability to track users across different web pages. And what that meant is that you could accumulate tons and tons of data and analyze it. But now, as of next year, all that data is going away because of all these new privacy laws. And so we're now in a new world. Brands are still spending a ton of money on digital, but they cannot determine what's working and what's not working. And they're not even going to be able to see anything come next year. So I came back and I said, there has to be a way to figure this out without going past and abusing people's privacy. And the magic to all this comes with AI. By utilizing AI, we're able to complete the dots so much better than we were before. So the nice thing is we don't need as much data, and we let the machines do most of the heavy lifting now. Leave the math to the computers, which is where it's supposed to be. So that's essentially what I've developed with this new brand, Provalytics. It's attribution, which is marketing effectiveness, determining what's working and what's not working for this new privacy-centric world where there's not going to be any more what we call cookies. Cookies are the tracking technology of the internet, and those are just going away.
And the cookie apocalypse, as you we may end up using that title, although we're obviously talking about way more than cookies. But this is very, very interesting, because I think that the way that the way that you're responding to changes in the industry is you almost have to, you do, you have to take a side, you have to take a position, you have to decide what am I going to try to do in the face of change, and change is constant. Like they say, the only constant is change. And I also like the idea that you're seizing on AI for something that it's really good at, which I think a lot of people are. We were talking about it for a minute before the interview. A lot of people are put back on their heels by AI, but I think in most cases it's that they just don't know what to do with it. It's like a performing monkey, it'll come out and do this crazy dance for you, and then you're like, oh, that's amazing, and you don't know what to do. Do you put money in it in its symbols case, or do you like do something cool with it? So tell me, give us a little bit of insight into the math, into what you're using AI for at Provalytics.
Yeah, here's a great example. So, right now, most advertisers are making decisions on what to do next month based upon past performance, meaning you look at last month, maybe you look at trends over the last couple of months, and you say, okay, I should spend more here in this campaign and less here based upon what I'm seeing historically. So what marketers have to do is they have to use what happened in the past and then their best guess, if you will, on what they think is going to happen next. Well, where AI comes in really well is that you can look at all of that historical data and you can ask AI to say, hey, my budget is going to be the same over the next month. What I want you to do is to run hundreds of thousands of simulations, because every day is a little bit different. So I want you to compare every Monday to the previous, 100 past Mondays, every Tuesday, look at holidays, look at all of these different scenarios and look at how these different players have worked well together. And I want you to output for me, based upon all these scenarios, what is the best possible plan, knowing that my budget is going to be exactly the same this month as it is last month. And then it does all the math. It goes in and does it all. Now, what's cool about the math that it utilizes, and this is what a lot of people don't know, that the basis of AI for most of it is in what they call Bayesian. And Bayesian has been around, oddly enough, since the 1700s. I mean, and the reason that Bayesian is working so well is because it thinks and it reacts the way that human beings think. And what I mean by that is, just like I said, that most marketers would look at how things did last month and they would make their best guess. Bayesian is essentially making its best guess based upon all the information that it has. The only difference is that it can do all of the math, and it can do what 100 humans would take them to do in a week. It can do it in 2 or 3 minutes or less, depending upon how many instances you have up and running of these computers.
Right. Fascinating. And when you look at your audience, the audience for Provalytics, what is your avatar? What is the makeup of your audience?
My audience makeup is chief marketing officers and VPs of marketings and CFOs at larger companies that are spending above 20 million or more per year in their marketing expense. Those where the CFOs look at the marketing expense and they're like, gosh, this is such a huge number. They look at, whenever it comes time to cut, they look at the numbers and they say, okay, our head count is expensive. Let's cut there. And then they're like, oh, our next highest one is usually cloud expenses is a big one. And then they're like, marketing. My God, why are we spending so much on marketing, Hersh, if you're the CMO? And they say, Hersh, you got to cut. You have to cut like 50% this quarter. Oh, but let me tell you something, Hersh, it can't impact sales this quarter, but you have to cut. Right. So how are you as a CMO going to figure that out? That's a lot of math. And what most CMOs do is they make their best guess, which is let's let the machines, let's let the AI do that for us. Now, does that mean we're going to do exactly what the AI says? Absolutely not. But we're going to let that help us make the best decision.
Right. It's going to be a tool in your decision-making process that would otherwise be just incredibly time-consuming and fallible and just who knows what else. So how do the CMOs and CFOs find out about you? Like, how do you come to their attention?
That's a great question. It's about being a thought leader, putting messages out there, going to events, and connecting with folks. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about one-to-one marketing. It's all about connecting and finding folks that are having issues. You know, what's interesting is we're dealing in this world where things aren't really going to change until about a year from now, because about a year from now is when this apocalypse event is going to actually occur.
Right.
And
for those of you just joining us, that's the cookie apocalypse.
Cookie apocalypse.
Not any number
collapse. Yeah.
The cookie collapse. Not any of the other myriad apocalypse that could possibly be.
Before. You know how I feel sometimes like Chicken Little. You know, I'm running around and I'm telling people the sky's falling, and they're like, "Well, it's still there. It hasn't happened yet."
Right.
So but you know, the problem for most larger enterprise companies is that, you know, compared to a startup, if you're a startup and, you know, and something happens today, by Friday you have a solution in place, and it's across your whole company, because there's only 5 of you, let's say, or there's only 2 of you. But when you have 3,000 employees and you have 200 people in your marketing department who are all utilizing a certain solution, well, to change the way that you operate can take a year or more, sometimes 2 years. And that's the problem. The larger you are, the more time it takes for people to accept change and build consensus within an organization. So that's why I'm ringing the bell to everybody,
right,
as much as possible, to let them know, hey, you know, change is coming.
Yeah. And so to circle around and bring it to like the nitty gritty of, you know, this communication circle that you have with your prospective clients, with your clients. You know, we talk about this almost every episode about, you know, everything is starting as granular as, you know, your company itself, and then your email list, and then, you know, you kind of balloon and mushroom out into the public. In your case, your B2B, you know, your audience, so to speak, is your clientele. But in terms of that more intimate relationship with the email list, you mentioned that you have an email list. You'd kind of nurture it. How does that function in terms of, you know, keeping top of mind awareness, or getting new, you know, converts, if you will, to actually using Provalytics versus just learning about it or glomming information from it?
Well, for me in my business, folks have to feel some pain in order for them to make a decision to move over to Provalytics based upon what they're doing. So not everyone is in market. They will be at some point or another, but not everyone not everyone is ready for that. And I think that's important when you're in the B2B space, is to understand that not everyone is going to be your customer today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even 6 months from now, but eventually at some point they're going to be in market. And when they are, you want to make sure, like you said, to stay top of mind. So what's important is to create things for folks when they're getting to the point of thinking about it, or even before they're in market, tools and things that are useful for them. So one of the things that's useful for them, when you think about people who are almost in market, is we created a playbook. And a playbook is a way to look at the landscape. This is a very confusing landscape. There's a lot of players there, and we've created an entire list of criteria and created this playbook, an Excel playbook that brands can download for no cost. And it allows them to go in and customize the playbook based upon criteria that are important to their organization. And then it gives a list of recommendations and ranks not only us, but other players in the space on who they should talk to based upon what their criteria are. We're not always the right solution for folks, depending upon what they're looking for. So that's someone who's actually thinking about being in market, or someone who's actually in market. A little higher funnel than that are folks who are saying, hey, I've heard about this cookie collapse. I mean, how can you not hear about it in my space? It's changing not just measurement, but it's also changing targeting, how they're buying their ads. The ability to target customers the way they used to is going away. So they're already starting to notice that their ads are not as effective as they used to be. And they're wondering, why is that? So I created a certification course, an attribution certification that covers all of the changes that are going on. And brands can actually enroll for free, their entire team. It's actually available at attributioncertified.com. That redirects to a page on our site where folks can sign up and go through that. It gives them a certificate that they can put on LinkedIn. But it tells the story historically about where we were, how brands moved over to digital, and the changes that have occurred since then, and all of these new challenges that are in place. So it helps them to understand kind of the why of what's going on and a little bit of the how as well, too. So that's how we're keeping top of mind. And it's just a matter of almost every day, there's new stories that are coming out about our industry and about the changes that are going on. There's a story today about Google and the FTC that are going on, all the litigation that's happening. There's a lot of litigation, a lot of class action litigation that's happening where brands are now at risk for even having Google Analytics on their site. So this is a scary day for a lot of large brands, a lot of moving parts. And for someone like myself, there's a lot for me to comment on. And that's a great way of capturing attention. And as we talked about earlier, having an opinion. That's what really matters in this space is people are not looking for someone to tell them exactly, be middle of the road. I'm very opinionated in terms of the direction that things are moving and what's the right move for brands in this space.
Yeah, that's a really important point to button to this is that, like I had mentioned, taking a stand, taking a position, it's your, as opposed to, what network news should be like, where they didn't editorialize. It's kind of your responsibility as an expert in the field to editorialize and say, well, here's what it means through the prism of my, of what I do and what I've learned. And you had mentioned that you want to continue to grow this company. Obviously the timing is right. That's kind of why you jump back into it from this angle. But how do you see pursuing the growth? Is there anything that we haven't touched on as far as strategies for growing what you're building?
Well, I think one of the most important things from a strategic standpoint of view is that I'm doing different this time. Last time with my former startup, it was all encompassing. It was a 24/7, which is the way most business owners are. And I didn't have much of a life outside of work. Work became number one. And as a result, when you start to look back at yourself, your younger self, you're like, my God, I can't believe I made my way through that. That wasn't a very healthy existence.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing that I'm putting first and foremost is for me to stay healthy throughout this journey and giving time for myself and making certain that I'm enjoying the fruits of my labor. I'm actually enjoying a weekend and I'm not constantly checking in. I'm on top of things. So I think that's the first thing. And that's not what they tell you in the VC world. That's not what a lot of founders are like. But for me, in order for me to play the long game here, I've got to be healthy all the way through that. And the only way to do that is to be physically fit, make sure I'm eating right, and also make sure my mind is sharp. And the only way to do that is you have to spend time thinking about other things, because that expands your mind and that allows you to solve the big problems that you solve in everyday business. So that's important. Strategically, it's more about putting out the messaging out there, which is things are changing. You have to find a solution for it. And what's changing also overall is that this concept of data, we have a whole generation of marketers, especially younger marketers, who have never worked without large amounts of data. And so I'm already starting to see a lot of marketers starting to freak out. They don't really know how to react in this new world. And so I think there's a place for us to be. But really, I see my company's role as really stress reduction for marketers, because I'm showing them how to utilize AI and advanced math to help them make better decisions. And really, it's not about making better decisions. It's about making decisions today that are less wrong than the ones you made yesterday. Because there's no exact answers in this. It's about being less wrong. And the nice thing about using AI is that every day you feed it more information, it gets smarter and smarter. It learns more and more about your campaign. And so what that means is that every day it's going to make smarter and smarter decisions. And that's what's really cool about it.
Yeah, and it goes with kind of without saying, but it resonated with me as you were saying it, that the human element, the part that's driving you to utilize all of these wonderful tools, and the part that's kind of, that you just mentioned, I have to maintain my own health, and I have to maintain a little bit of distance from the result, and I have to just kind of not be all consumed. And the theme that came through again and again was, both for your clients and for yourself in this space, don't make the same mistakes again. Don't make, just because something was quote unquote successful doesn't mean that it was successful all around in every area, and there's something to learn from it. And I mean, you've really given us a lot of really great insights, and I really think we've also learned a lot about about this space that you're in now. Just to close out, is there a hope or a kind of a little tidbit of inspiration that you want to close with, that just kind of maybe more global in terms, it could still be in terms of business, but just a little more global in terms of where we're at in this moment in time?
Well, I think where we're at in this moment in time, a lot of folks my age, they keep saying to me, things are moving so fast. It's hard for me to catch up. And what's interesting to me is that I don't feel that. I feel as things are speeding up, they're slowing down a bit, because I'm seeing trends, and I feel like we've been here before. And so I think with age, one of the advantages that you have is you've lived long enough that you've seen things swing one way and you see them swing back another way. So for me, I'm confident that any tough times that folks are facing in business, especially in the marketing space, and things are going to feel like they're going to get really tough. But what I like to remind marketers is that before digital, we had even less data. We didn't have anything. We would run a TV campaign, and then we would do a survey to see how our awareness lifted up, our aided awareness or unaided awareness. And that's how marketers judged the effectiveness of campaigns. That's how marketers made decisions on whether to run the campaign again or do a different campaign. So I feel like that we're ahead of the game, and that things, having less information, is actually going to make us better marketers. But there's going to be a lot of stress along the way, and that's what I'm here to help with. Just as I'm managing my own stress with this business, Provalytics is here to help other marketers handle the stressful decisions that they need to make. And this way we can help them utilizing AI, which is absolutely wonderful. We finally found a good use for it.
If you liked the show,
Yes, and
it worked for you,
yes, then
subscribe and leave a
yes, friend.
5-star review.
Yes, friend.
Tell all your friends.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Did I make it clear?
Yes, friend.
Get your branding on
Yes.
before they're gone.
Yes.